If you've ever been to one of my lectures, you know I always tell my students it took me 34 years to get my bachelor's degree, primarily because I had a typewriter. I can't spell. I'm lousy at formatting. I'm lousy at trying to edit while I type. I always end up rewriting things. And so the word processor by itself, I mean, the only reason I was ever able to get all the degrees that I have is that I had a word processor. And in that word processor was a spell checker, a grammar checker, and even a citation generator. And those are the things that I want to show you today because they're essential for you to understand how to do some of the stuff that I require for your class, citations in the proper format. In this case, Chicago inline. This is an anthro class, so you're required to do Chicago inline. And how to set up the grammar and the spelling so that basically from this point on your papers are going to be much better, and you're never going to give me anything that is ungrammatical or spelled wrong. At least that's the goal. So before we go any farther, I want to cover a few specifics. These are generic to all of the papers in any of my courses. They probably are very similar to what you have in other classes, but I want to make sure that we're all on the same page. So first of all papers turned in should be double spaced. There are exceptions to that: block quotes, headers, things like that, your footnotes, if you have any, which should be endnotes, not footnotes. But in those cases, those should all be single spaced, but the bulk of your paper should be double spaced. Indent the first line 1/2 inch. And I'll show you how to do all these settings in just a real quick minute. There should be no extra space between paragraphs. Most of you, when you got Word initially, or when you accessed Word initially, it had a default to stick extra space between paragraphs. And what I want you to do is go in, and I'll show you how to do that. Go in and set that so that it doesn't automatically insert spaces, because I'm always marking little arrows, too much space, remove space, etc. And it's really something that you can do in just a couple of clicks and you will never have the problem again. But it's necessary in order for your papers to all be standard so that they all look alike. Why do they all look alike? So that when I'm looking at it, I know exactly how many words there are per page. I know whether you're padding, etc., etc. So it's just to make it consistent. I don't want a cover page or folder. Very few, if any, papers are going to be turned in physically in your class. Most of it's going to be done electronically through Google Drive or something comparable to that. But I don't need a cover page. I don't want a cover page. Even though it's not wasting any paper, it's not necessary. Simply put the header at the top of the page and enter your title and start writing on the very first page. On the first page, I do want the name, the date, and the course number. That way I know, even though you're in the right place, you might, for some reason, have put it in the wrong place. So this is just easier for me to keep it clear. I want that in the upper left or right-hand corner, and I want it single-spaced. You can always go back and reformat it. If the default's double and it comes out that way, go back and make it single-spaced before you try to turn it in. I also want 1-inch margins all the way around. Now, different versions of Word have had different defaults. They've had 1 1/4, they've had 1 1/2. Maybe yours are set to 3/4. But if you set them all to 1-inch margins, then I know that you are not padding, essentially. If you have margins other than 1 inch, then it's harder for me to gauge, just by looking at the page, how many words you have on there. And that's important. This is a W class, or if it isn't a W class, at least I'm requiring very similar requirements. And word count is important, and I use how the page is filled up to ascertain what it is, in addition to using the automatic counters in Word. And I want the pages numbered, but I don't want the first page numbered, so I will also show you how to do that. And if you follow those, at least your formatting is going to be absolutely perfect. So what we're looking at right now is a couple of pages from a document I wrote a while back. The content doesn't matter, it's the formatting that I want us to talk about. So the first thing I want us to look at is essentially the paragraph setup. So if we go over here to home, and you notice that there are all these styles. These are called styles, and they set up different types of formatting. And if you learn how to use these, they will help you a great deal. So normally, every document defaults to the, no pun intended, normal template. These are templates that give formatting instructions to Word. And so you'll see that this particular paragraph that I'm at right now is formatted with the normal format. And if we go up here and we look at the actual formatting for it, we'll notice that it is exactly what I just talked about. Double space, 0 points after, 0 points before. We want the first line indented by 1/2 inch, and we want it aligned left. We're not doing any outline levels. Some people like to do justified. Don't do it. It makes it harder to read, and they all should be left justified here. So that's your very first thing. Now, if your normal isn't set up like that, set it to look just like this. Click OK. Now go up to the normal style in your style bucket here. Right click on it and you will see update normal to match selection. If you click that, that will save in your template these settings for normal, and now every time you go into it they'll be there. So a couple things I want to talk about that we're going to do here. That's how to set the defaults. The other thing I want to do at this particular point is I want to insert page numbers. And if you remember right, I told you that I wanted page numbers, and I don't want the first page numbered. So here I'm at the bottom of page 1 right here. This is page 2, page 3, page 4. So what we're going to do is going to go to Insert and then go over to Page Number. Now, I don't really care where you put them. I tend to put them at the bottom of the page, and I tend to put them way over on one side. That's just my preference. I don't care. You can center them, you can put them on the top, you can put them on the bottom. Don't put them in the margins. Just put them either in the top footer, the top header, or the bottom footer. So I'm going to pick, in this case, to put it over in this corner. Now, look right here, right where I am right now. See where the mouse is? It says different first page, and you'll notice here is page 1. If I click this button, that goes away, but they continue to be on page 2. So here's where it was. Here's where page 2 goes. And so what I want to do now is I want to show you how to set up some defaults in the proofing tools that Word provides. Again, I've said before, if you're using a different word processor, I'm assuming that these functions exist. They are in most modern word processors, but I don't know where they are, so you'll have to find them. They're also maybe in a different place depending on your version of Word, or whether you're using Windows, or whether you are using the the Mac version of it. So Windows, Mac, other word processors, they're all going to be a little bit different, but I would imagine that most of these functions exist in most of these applications. So here we are back in our document, and I want to go up to the File menu and then down to Options. And this is where we're going to get the chance to set the settings that will be your defaults throughout. And so here we go to Proofing Tools. Usually it's, at least in the different versions of Word that I have, it's usually about the third one down on this Options menu. Proofing. Now, ignoring words in uppercase, that's your option. If you that way it won't tell you things like UNESCO or spelled wrong. But if you think you're going to need to check uppercase words, then you should turn that one on. I tend to leave it off. Ignore words that contain numbers, ignore internet and file addresses, so URLs won't be spell checked. Flag repeated words. That one's crucial because very often we'll be typing and then we'll type an extra the, or something like that. This will flag that and let you know that it happens. If you're not writing in French, don't care about that. Most of you don't have separate custom dictionaries, so just leave that blank and it'll sort that out. French modes, again, you're not using it. If you also use Spanish as well as English in your word processor, you might want to set some of the settings here. These are not the crucial ones. These up here I do care about. And then as we scroll down a little bit, we see when correcting spelling and grammar in Word, ... check spelling as you type. That way it'll catch them as you make the errors. Mark grammar errors as you type. Frequently confused words. That's the blue squiggles where the word is spelled right, but it's the wrong word in that particular context. And then check the grammar with the spelling, and that's really, really important. This readability statistics, This will allow you to see what level, what grade level you're writing at. Most newspapers, for example, are written on a 6th grade level. Magazines are written probably at an 8th to 10th grade level. Most college textbooks are written on a 10th grade level for lower division classes. They go up from there. But this would allow you to actually see at what level you're writing. If you're coming up, at pretty low levels, you might want to start thinking about your word choices, your sentence structures, things like that. Now, here on this is where the most important thing is right here where it says grammar and more. In my case, I've got grammar and more. It might say grammar and spelling. It might have a number of different options here depending on which version you're using. But I want it to have be most inclusive. So in this case, I'm going to choose grammar and more. And So in this case, I'm going to choose grammar and more, and then I'm going to click settings. And this brings up a huge list of stuff. And I really want everything checked. So, agreement between the noun and adverb, noun phrases, capitalization of March and May. Those are months that may or may not be months. They are also regular words. Comma after greetings. Just essentially turn everything on. Even here, you see I have some that are turned off. I'm going to turn these all on because I want all of these to be flagged when I'm writing, because these are all common stylistic and grammatical things that we want to focus on. Definitely turn on contractions. We want to use a very formal language. I want it to be flagged if I'm too informal. I want slang flagged. Essentially, 90% of what we are looking for, we want to be it's right here in this dialog box. The Oxford comma, that's that comma that says I've got 3 items in a list. Do I put a comma after the second one before the and or the or? I would think that for 90% of your writing, you would want that comma. I gave an example the other day in one of my classes where I had 2 items, and then I put the comma and the word and then I had 2 items that were essentially grouped together. And so that comma was necessary to differentiate between the first and, which linked the first 2 and the what came after that, from the 2 that are separated by an and that are in that last final portion of that particular phrase. So by turning on the Oxford comma, that will ensure that you always have that third one. Punctuation required within quotes should be set to inside, and space between sentences should be set to 1 space. Now the default used to be 2 under typewriters because every letter was the same width, whether it was a W or an I. And to provide a little bit of breathing room between sentences, make it easier to find the end of a sentence, the default for academic writing using typewriters used to be 2 spaces. Now that we use proportional fonts, and you will be using Times New Roman or something very close to that, we only need the 1 space. And so that actually, in a short document it does make a big difference, but in a long document that can make a huge difference as far as the spacing and all that. So essentially I want all of these turned on. The more of these that we turn on, the more that that Word will flag the problems, and the more likely we are to fix them, and the more likely you are to give me a paper that is as close to perfect as you can possibly get. So far I've shown you how to do the page numbers, including keeping the first page blank. I've shown you how to set your default paragraph settings so that you have proper double-space format for academic papers, and I've shown you how to set the grammar and style and spelling options in the proofing tool to basically check for everything, and that should almost instantaneously improve your writing, because as it flags more and more issues, you'll go back, you'll address them, and you probably turn in some of the best papers you've ever written in your entire collegiate career. There are a couple things I still want to cover. I want to cover how to do citations. And this is something you shouldn't be afraid of. This is something that Word handles very, very easily, especially for the formats that we need in this particular class, as well as MLA and APA and several of the other really standard formats. So the best thing for you to learn how to, the best reason for you to learn how to use this is that you can apply this in other classes as well. And so let's take a look at that right now. So what I want you to do is you're typing along, and let's say you want to put in a citation here. Now this already has one. This is a document that I've worked on multiple times over the years, and I'm going to not save the changes, so I can mess it up a little bit here. But let's say that we want to add a reference right here where I've inserted the cursor. So come up here to your menu bar and click on References, and you'll notice that right here in the middle is an option to insert citation. Now, notice that on my system here there's an EndNote. This is something that as a Fresno State student or faculty or staff you can download from the Fresno State Library. It is an expensive program, but it is an amazing program. It does 30,000 different types of citation formats. Every publication out there has slightly different standards. EndNote knows them all, and every update it adds more and more and more, and it gets more and more flexible. The beauty of EndNote is that it stores every citation that you ever created into a database, and then you can use those in future documents. It's fully integrated with Word. It's as if it's part of the program. It's an add-on. If you're a Fresno State student and you're going to go to grad school especially, go download EndNote and learn how to use it. In lieu of that, for your undergraduate papers, though, I really feel that most of what you need to do you can do right here in this section that I'm circling with the cursor right now, this section that says Citations and Bibliography. The first thing I want you to do is I want you to check here and make sure that it's set to Chicago. You'll notice that it does APA, also does MLA, does a few others. It doesn't do Turabian very well, so if you have to write a history paper, EndNote does Turabian beautifully. Not so beautiful in Word. I have it because I need it, but I never ever use it. I use EndNote for all my Turabian stuff. But you can use the Chicago here. So click on Chicago. That is the format that is the official Anthropology citation format as deemed by the American Anthropological Association. So our cursor is sitting here. Let's say that this is not Fentress and Wickham. We're going to put in something else just so that we can play with it here. Click on Insert Citation, and you'll notice that I'd already put one in here. John Smith applied anthro at Fresno State. It was a made-up situation. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to add a new source, and let's put in Jones, James. It's not a corporate officer. It's where this happens to be in a journal article. You'll notice here you can set it for all kinds of stuff. Books, book sections, journal article, article and periodical, a whole bunch of different options. More than likely you're going to be doing either a book section, or a journal article for anything in this particular class. So the title of this is going to be Anthro Applied to Ag. And it's in the Agricultural Anthropology Journal. I don't believe there probably is one, but I don't know that this is an actual title or not. It was published in 2017, and it's on pages 145 to 176. That is all you need to do. And now click OK, and right here it inserts a properly formatted citation. Now, what I want you, and this should have a period after it that will hook it to what comes before. Remember, Fentress and Wickham aren't really there. This is just to illustrate how this goes. The next thing I want you to do is go to the very end of your document, add a page. Now ignore what I've got on the screen here because that's my old works cited page, but I'm going to come up here, and if you go here to where it says Bibliography and you click Works Cited, it will create a properly formatted works cited with the things that are actually applied, actually stuck into this document. It will put it in. It'll do it alphabetically. It'll create it. So every citation that you would use in that document, you would end up with entries back here. And it will look like this if you have a long enough document. This happens to be the prior works cited page that was for the document that I'm playing around in here. I just pulled it up to give you something to look at. So that's how you let Word do citations for you. You just click Insert Citation. If the document has already got that citation in it, it will have saved it. You won't have to retype it. This will also keep track of everything that you've added. And then you can come over here and set up your actual Works Cited page by going to the end and clicking on Works Cited, and it will set it up for you. You don't have to know how to do this stuff. You can simply look at what's there and what's within Word, and it'll work fine. Before we move away from citations, I want to cover again the basics for this particular class so that you know exactly what you're supposed to be doing. You must cite every fact, every thought, every paraphrase, every quote, in fact, anything you got from anywhere. If you're going to tell me the sky is blue, I'll probably let you get by. If you want to tell me how the sky is blue or why the sky is blue, I need a citation. So anything that is not really common knowledge, you must have a citation. You can only use, in this class, Chicago inline citation format. That is it. I will not accept MLA, APA, or any other format. It must be inline citations, and you must have a work cited page. Now, sometimes you'll label it a reference page, sometimes you'll label it a bibliography. You will get zeros for those, just like you'll get zeros if you don't include citations, right? No citations, you get a 0. No properly formatted works cited page, you'll get a 0. So you might want to do this, pay really close attention to this. I want a work cited page. That only includes works that are actually cited in the work. If you don't cite it, it doesn't belong there. And this is different from a reference page. In a reference page, you would put everything, not only the things that you cited, but things that led to your thinking. So everything you read on the subject would be included in a reference page. So that's all resources that you rely on when you're preparing the paper, whether or not you cite it. A bibliography, which you may be asked to write an annotated bibliography, so this is something you might want to pay a little bit of attention to, but a bibliography usually includes an exhaustive list of sources that relate to the topic. You may not have read any of them. It is just a list of books, a bibliography, bookography study of this. That's what you're doing. You're just compiling a list of books. So make sure that what you have is a works cited page, that everything that is cited is in the works cited page. Nothing that is in the works cited page is missing from the rest of the document. And you do not have a reference page or a bibliography. So now I want to get to talking about block quotes. And you'll see there are 2 pages here from this document that are just filled with quotations. Much of this particular portion of this document I was citing a lot of theory, and so I used the words of the theorists themselves and then put my commentary and my linking information between the quotes. So here's a long quote from Bourdieu, and you'll see that it's indented on both sides, so you half an inch on each side, so that it lines up perfectly right here with the regular paragraph indent. That way it just makes it neater as it does that. By indenting on this side over here, you also get a much cleaner break between the single-spaced block quote and the double-spaced text that is mine. You'll notice that there is no quotation marks at the beginning or at the end. Because you've got it set up as a block, it's already flagged that this is a quote, and then of course the citation is at the end. So you can see you come to the end of your regular thought in your paragraph, you hit enter, you come down. I would just type this all in. And going back to the styles that we talked about before, you'll notice I have a block quote style here. And essentially it does all of this formatting. It single spaces everything. It indents everything a half an inch. It doesn't indent the first line an additional half inch, and it indents this side at a half inch. So basically all I have to do is just put the cursor in the middle of the paragraph. It's a block quote, push the button, and it becomes a block quote. That's the easiest way to do this, and that's why styles become so important. If you set up styles for normals, for headings, for block quotes, much of your work can be automated. If you're writing a large document, the headings can be used to set up a table of contents. There's one other thing I wanted to point out about the block quotes, and that is the paragraph that follows. Now, everything that's on these 2 pages, you'll notice I have a paragraph, I have the block quote, and then I start a new paragraph. Now, if, and in this case, again, this is just for illustration, but let's say that my intention was that this block here is actually part of the paragraph that includes this and this. In other words, this follows on in the same paragraph. Rather than indent here, I would take this first line and remove the indent. That means that starting up here at Michael de Certeau and going all the way to here is a single paragraph. Otherwise, if this was the way it had been, this would be a paragraph, and this would be considered a paragraph. So this is why the indenting is so important. If we don't indent the first line of each paragraph, we really, especially when it comes to using block quotes, we really aren't clear if it's a new paragraph or it's a continuation of an existing paragraph. This really only covers the basics, what you need in order to write a paper for one of my classes. I think most of this will be applicable to your other classes. Spend some time knocking around the menus in Word and trying to learn some of the functions. You'll find that they're extremely useful, they're very powerful, and each of them makes your life so much easier. So I really encourage you to experiment and play, and I'm looking forward to your papers. Thanks for watching.